I am currently in my childhood bedroom that has been painted white since I was a kid, so it doesn't look like I used to when I was a kid, but I still have some of the books that I used to have, including the Twilight series in French. Since we're almost at the end of the year, today's the 22nd of December as I'm filming this, I thought I would make myself a little writing wrap. I'm gonna blame my moon in Virgo, but I very much love a pie chart. I love a chart, any sort of chart, and I love seeing stats coming together. So I have put together for my writing wrapped some statistics. Basically, every year I keep track of my writing per month. So I make one monthly spreadsheet within a bigger writing tracker spreadsheet, a Google sheet, and I keep track of what I do, including revision work, outlining work. I have some month, like for instance, in February of this year, that I was just counting chapters that I worked on because I was rereading, revising, getting rid of filler words, things like that. And it didn't really count as new words at all. So I did not count words for that. But when I was rewriting and sometimes copying and pasting in order to get the words in, I would count these. So that's essentially how I'm counting my words. So within the spreadsheet, I made a new sheet called totals where I have put all together the data from this entire year. So in my totals of this year, the big number is 127,649 words. Now, I could write a little bit extra for the rest of December, but I very much doubt that it will amount to a huge amount. I might get up to 128,000, but that's the max I'll get to, I'm pretty sure, because all I'm doing at the moment is outlining Nights of Death, as in outlining the end. Now, what I really like about this beautiful pie chart that breaks down every single month is that you can see my total average number is very close to like 10K-ish per month. I basically have my bigger month more towards 20K because my biggest month of the entire year was the month of April at 14.5% at 18,536 words. And my lowest month is technically February because I was just counting chapters. So it will say 90 words, but they're not words. There were chapters. And the actual smallest month is probably July, which is 1.7% of the pie chart. And it was a total of 2,164 words. It's not hard to guess why. It was the month, I think, after the news that my company was making redundancies and I was having a little bit of a crisis. So I didn't write much. And I think all I gave myself to do was an outline for one of my acts. I think it was for Act 2B. And that was it. And I barely did anything, and that's okay. I have a very big month around, well, April, I think, is when I started really diving into rules of survival and writing the bulk of Act 1. And then November, which is funny because you'll see afterwards that it's really just one half of the month during which I wrote. But that was my Act 3, and I knew exactly what I was doing, and I knew every word that needed to be there because I had outlined the shit out of it and I knew my ending. So that's why I sped through Act 3 and essentially wrote 18K for Act 3 in November. The funny thing is if I were to compare that year with my totals in 2024, they're very close. And I think my totals for 2024 were like 115K or something. And in 2024, I had a lot more word count based challenges. While this year, in 2025, I haven't given myself any single word count based challenge. The whole point of 2025 was just go with the flow, write when it feels good, don't push it, don't force yourself, take a break when you need one. And that worked out so much better for me because I can tell my months don't fluctuate as much and they're not as really high and really low. There's obviously a couple of outliers, like I've just said, but most of my months follow a similar average. And a lot of them sit around 10K to 12K. I can tell which ones are outlining month and I'm not giving myself too much work to like do extra. And then the other month are the ones when I was actually drafting or revising, and you can tell that they're higher, more like 10 to 12 to at points 17K. Now, my next set of data is the projects that I worked on and the type of work that I did throughout the year. So it's pretty simple pie charts for this. I had a quick look at which projects I worked on for the year, and I essentially worked on 3 in total, and they were very much one after the other. So at the beginning of the year, in January and February, I was revising The Art of Summoning Demons. For most of the rest of the year, I worked on my first draft of Rules of Survival. And finally, in December right now, I have just been working on re-outlining the end of Knights of Death. So you can see the pie chart is 75% Rules of Survival, which makes perfect sense. And then the type of work that I was doing is pretty much linked to that. Revisions was just for The Art of Summoning Demons, so there's just 2 in the bar chart, 18%. And then the rest of the year is pretty evenly divided between drafting and outlining at 45.5% and 36.4%. Reason being that I'm much more of an outliner now than I used to be. I used to be more of a pantser. I don't pants as much. And Rules of Survival has been my first properly outlined work, I would say, as in I have truly made an entire outline before writing, and then during the writing process, after each act was finished, I would outline the next one, now that I knew anything that had changed during the process of the draft, right? So I knew some things would be different, or I knew I had some plot holes I had not taken into account in my first outline, and I fixed those problems one after the other while I was reworking the individual outlines of each of those acts. So it's been more of a balancing work of going between drafting and outlining, and I've really liked it that way, and I feel like it's given me the breaks I needed between 2 heavy months of drafting, for instance. So that works better for me, and you can sort of tell that, yeah, the pie chart is almost half and half drafting and outlining. Then my next set of data is my writing versus non-writing days. This is pretty self-explanatory. I wanted to see how much of the year I was actually writing or outlining or anything, like basically any days that are not at 0. And then in all of my different monthly spreadsheets, any days that were at 0 count as non-writing days. So I did a total of writing days versus 0 days, and in total up until this point in the year, because obviously we have a few days left in December, but doesn't matter, I have written for a total of 169 days, and I have not written for a total of 186 days. And you can see the pie chart on the right is essentially almost half and half. I've worked and written or revised or outlined for half of the year, and I've done nothing with my writing for the other half of the year, pretty much. So my writing days are 47.6% and non-writing days 52.4%. And then you can see per month as well, where you can really see when I said I had a really low writing month in July, that it was only 3 writing days, and the rest of the month I did nothing at all. But I had a very heavy writing day in April because we sat at 18K in April. And in April, I wrote for a total of 25 days out of the entire month. So it's giving me the idea that when I do write, I tend to write a similar amount every single time, because this makes a lot of sense, except for my outlier, which is November, because you can see that in November, I only wrote 14 days out of the whole month. And yet it's one of my biggest writing months. Like I said, it was sitting at 18K as well. That's just because it was my Act 3. And like I said, once I had outlined it, I sped through it. Finally, I just wanted to know what my entire biggest writing day of the whole year was. And it is technically Friday, 17th of January, which is disappointing to know that I was at the very beginning of the year with 3,724 words in total. And it's interesting because I used to have writing days that were way bigger than that in 2024. I think I've done some writing days that were like 5K or so. And yet the final number in my word count for the entire year sits lower than this year. So I think it just works better for my mental health when I don't push myself to do these word count challenges and try so hard to get so many words in. And it just works way better when I let myself write when I need to write and not write when I need to take a break. So yes, January, 3,724. The second biggest day is in May, 3,703. And then after that, it's in November, 3,399, which might be the last day that I was writing Act 3. But other than those 2 biggest days, or 3 biggest days that are like 3K, all of my biggest days of each month are closer to 1,500 or so words. And this tells me that I am not trying so hard as I did in 2024 to write an insane amount of words and be super prolific in my word counts, and I'm just taking more time to do things right. And it turned out better for me because I did end up having more words in the entire year anyway. So that's the method that seemed to help my mental health cope with my writing. And that's it. I just wanted to do a few little pie charts and having a quick look back at my writing year for 2025. I did finish an entire draft for Rules of Survival. I did also finish writing the very last draft of The Art of Summoning Demons, so I can actually call that book finished and complete. And I also started a newsletter about my writing where I mostly talk about my inspiration for my books. I have essentially a recommendation station where I give you one movie, one book, one TV show, and even my song of the month every single month. And I have been pretty consistent since I started it. So that's another win for the year for my writing. And I also vlogged the entirety of my journey in writing Rules of Survival, which I think it is another writing achievement for 2025 that I'm really happy about. So yeah, that was my Writing Wrapped 2025. I hope you guys liked it. If you did, leave a like on this video. I would really appreciate it. And I will see you guys in the next one.